Joe, I cry all the time too now, and I think it's cathartic for me, right? Like I feel like I just sometimes I'll put on Lonesome Dove just because I know like I got to get some of this out,
I have a
you know?
crying song. It's "Goodbye, Dear Friend" by a band called Deer Tick. I'm telling you, you want a good cry, it's
That's
oh my
awesome.
god.
I
Yeah.
mean, crying's manly, dude.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill said that he blubbed a lot and he saved the freaking world. So like, it doesn't get much manlier than that.
Your stories, your service, your community. This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
All right, Alphas, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast. We're here to engage today's veterans through authentic stories, education, and entertainment, and build a virtual community that celebrates continued service and supports the American Legion's mission. We're glad you're here to be part of that community. And Joe, I hear you got something for us today.
I do. Right now, across the veteran community, there's a big shift happening. Less focus on getting veterans into systems and more focus on bringing connection. And I think that's something that, as a whole, we're really desperate for. We're desperate for those connections. We've sort of slipped back, and it's time. But we're seeing everything from cooking classes to wellness programs popping up nationwide, built around one idea. Veterans are far more likely to open up when it doesn't feel like they're getting help. I think that's one reason why service dogs work so well. It's sneaky therapy. Because it turns out sometimes the breakthrough doesn't happen in a clinic. It happens when, you're standing in somebody's kitchen or sitting across from at a table or sitting in a brand new Black Rifle coffee shop somewhere. But it's not therapy. It's reach out, sit down, and talk human to human. And I think that's what today's guests are building. And so, Adam, if you will, tell us about who's joining us today.
Yeah, today we got Cory Brown. He's an Army veteran, and and the guy behind Eat Your Feelings. And no, that's not what you normally do
One
on
of
a
my
Friday night
favorite
after
things
a
to do.
breakup. So he's come in alongside his co-host Sam Nathews, a strategic communications pro and longtime friend, and together they're creating something pretty unique. They're bringing veterans and civilians to the same table, literally, where conversations happen over food, walls come down, and the kinds of honest stories you don't usually hear finally get the space they deserve. So excited to have them on today.
And after that interview, we're going to have a little scuttlebutt where we'll talk about a executive order that loosens research restrictions around psychedelics. And then we've got another one about blast injuries and TBI.
Yeah, executive order around psychedelics, something I didn't think I would ever hear. So excited to talk about that. All right, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be back with Cory and Sam right after the break.
Hello, Legion family. I can't believe how quickly the past year has flown by. We are now just weeks away from celebrating 250 years of our great nation. Of course, the American Legion has been counting down to this milestone with our USA 250 Challenge. We have seen posts conduct successful community service projects. We have seen Legionnaires improve their mental wellness. And we have seen American Legion family members achieve fitness goals. I am very impressed with these accomplishments, but we have one challenge left to conquer. My goal is to raise $150,000 for the Veterans and Children Foundation. The VCF changes lives and saves lives, but it can only do so with our funding from your donations or fundraising efforts. I know that American Legion family members can rally to execute a mission. This is our mission, raising $150,000 for our disabled veterans and military families in need. We are close, but we need your help. Please consider a tax-deductible donation of any amount to the USA 250 Challenge. Thank you for your support, your continued service to our military veterans, and all that you do.
All right, we got some great guests with us here today. We got Sam and Cory Brown. We're going to start with Cory Brown, Army veteran and creator of Eat Your Feelings, is rethinking how veterans connect swapping clinical settings for kitchen tables and real conversations over food. I love food. That means I love Cory. But he's joined by co-host Sam Nathews. His parents misspelled Matthews when he was born. A strategic communications pro and longtime friend who brings civilian perspective into these conversations, proving that connection doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. So we so glad to have you guys here. Welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thanks for
Thank
having
y'all
us.
for having us. Yes, and I'm sorry. You know I'm from Alabama. We don't spell so good, so my last name's a lost cause, too.
Don't get
Sam,
it
Cory,
tattooed.
pleasure to have you guys. You're up in DC now, but Sam, like we were talking about beforehand, you guys are actually from Alabama. So I like to go a little bit Sean Ryan here style and just
You
start
gonna
with
give us
your
a pistol?
That's it. We got a pistol for you. I got a friend over at Glock. I
Sick.
got a
He would
friend
have
that's
gone
sick. It's
sick. Yeah.
custom. We're gonna go on my range right after. We'll shoot it. All
Nice.
right. Now tell me about your bio. Okay. And we got questions from the Patreon. Okay, sorry, Sean. No, but seriously, bios. So maybe we just start with you, Cory, and then you, Sam. You know, just tell us a little bit about if you did indeed grow up in Alabama. Tell us why God favored you so much and how that maybe led to service, you know, for you, Cory.
Well, before the Army, God made me an Auburn man. So there's the answer to your first question.
Yeah, it takes balance. He can't be perfect.
Oof.
But yeah, it's funny. We tell people all the time that we grew up in towns right next to each other in Shelby County, Alabama, but we didn't meet till we got up here. So it's like your typical DC love story, you know,
Mm-hmm.
met on
Met
a
at a
panel.
conference. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 16 and a half years in the Army, half of that in the National Guard, the other half on active duty. I think I had 2 years before 9/11, and then the world changed, you know, as we all know. Cavalry, just about all the way. So we did route recons and convoy security in Iraq, 07, 08, out of Camp Spiker. And, you know, people, sometimes they talk about having one or two life-changing events, and I think all four of us could probably say we had a life-changing event almost every year sometimes.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And Sam, you come at this from the civilian side. So tell us a little bit about your origin story and how did you, what convention was it that you guys met at?
We were our meet cute was at a this group called Beekeeper Group. They're
Yeah.
a digital advocacy firm that we both worked with, and it was a panel about something related to advocacy a long time ago. But we were the only two rednecks on the panel, so we fell in
Nice.
love. Yeah,
So y'all was
Yeah.
getting it.
that's
Yeah.
right. Right there in front of God and everybody at
Yeah.
the
Y'all
conference.
getting it.
Yep.
That's
So
good.
Sam, what's your background is comm strategy. So what was that kind of path for you, and what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so I was one of God's chosen few who went to the University of Alabama and not Auburn, and majored in public relations there, and interned in DC and got stuck. So stayed up here for a while and have had a fun career. My day job is doing public relations and brand strategy for the spirits industry, so the distilled spirits industry, their trade association in DC. And then met my wife up here 8 years ago and conned her into marrying me and trapped her with a kid. And he just is about to turn 2.
Baby
She's way
trap.
out of my league. Yeah,
Congrats,
classic tale. Classic tale.
Tale as old as
So
time.
yeah, and it's a strategy that worked pretty well for me. She's pretty hot. And so just been up here for about 15 years, and Cory had the idea for this show for about 10 of those years and decided to make it happen when I was busier in my life than I've ever been before. So, but I'm glad that he did, man. It's been a wild ride. I've gotten to meet some awesome, awesome people and do some really cool things. And it has been a humbling ride too, because the level of service and sacrifice that the men and women that Cory has been fortunate enough to introduce me to, and like you guys, is just an incredibly humbling experience, and just grateful to know folks like y'all for sure.
So can
So
you
Co-
tell
Co-
me a little bit about exactly what Eat Your Feelings is, right quick, before we go any further?
Yeah, I mean, the simplest answer I can give you. So we don't take up too much time, is I needed some way to talk about the hard things in life, the things that a lot of people, especially a lot of veterans, struggle with. I don't want to take Sam's line, but I needed something also that
He's
was for
going to.
everybody. Because I had seen not only people struggle in the military and veteran community, but my wife is a nurse, right? So there's the first responder and the healthcare community, right? I've worked in corporate America for 14 years, and some of those people, same sort of things, right? Like a lot of us have these struggles, and if you looked at YouTube a few years ago, it was everything that was dealing with mental health was like too clinical or too cold or too boring. I was like, well, if I want to get to these conversations, what can I use as the vehicle to get there? And I knew it had to be something that I was connected with, that was passionate about. That was cooking. And I loved cooking shows. That's what drew me to YouTube in the first place, was cooking shows. So I was like, well, there it is. Like I was finally able to put it into all these feelings inside me, put it into a place that I could like work with it. That was the biggest obstacle in the beginning. So Eat Your Feelings became like using cooking and me and Sam cutting up to really get to the meat of the matter, which I wanted to talk about, was all the struggles that we have and how can you deal with that, and how can you know that you're not alone, and how can you be okay to not be okay, all the things, right? The Eat Your Feelings show became our vehicle to getting to those kind of conversations.
I just want to add in that you've inspired me. I really like murder interrogation, so I'm going to get involved in that world.
You should.
Yeah.
You should. You know what? You should murder somebody while you're cooking something on YouTube.
You should not
Blend the
murder
two
anybody.
worlds.
Shouldn't do it.
Adam's always the voice of reason. He's like, you should not do that, Joe. I'm very easy to influence. You guys have.
Well, what's sad is that he knows he has to say that to you, otherwise you might.
Maybe go with your
Mhm.
second favorite passion.
The last
Joe.
thing we need is somebody clipping this saying that you should do that.
I just marked a clip.
So Cory, you've had this idea. Is that true that you had this idea for much longer, for about 10 years?
I don't know that it was 10, but it was a long time.
Yeah.
It was a long
Okay.
time just sitting there in a way that I couldn't put words to,
Yeah, sure.
and I couldn't figure out how to act on it. Took me a while to get to there.
So then Sam, so he brought you the idea, and what were your kind of thoughts? And tell us about, kind of
Other than why now?
operationally.
Yeah,
Other
right.
than why
Other
now,
than why now.
how busy you are. No, but how did it kind of come together, and what's it kind of been like? And you guys are in season 2 now, so what a season under your belt, how's it going, and what's it been like?
It's been amazing, man. I mean, we shot this the first episodes thinking, and I'm thinking like, this will be something cool to show my son. He can laugh at it one day. Like it'll have been fun to show our friends, and the reaction that we got blew my mind. And the opportunities that it's opened for us to hopefully broaden the message and broaden the exposure to these issues, and make people feel more comfortable talking about difficult things with the people that they're close to. It just has blown my mind, honestly. And Cory's not telling you the part where he sat on this for years and kept talking to our other guy who owns the production video agency that filmed the episodes for years, and would chew his ear off every lunch talking about this idea. And finally, and he's a big old dude. He played like defensive end at South Dakota or something, like corn fed. And he looked at him and he said, have you like wrote a business plan or scripted out an episode or anything? And he goes, no, man. And he goes, well, why don't you shut the F up and about talking to me about this until you do. So he did. And a couple months later we were filming. So huge, honestly, props to Cory, because how many of us have these big old harebrained, big dream ideas and don't do anything with them? And Cory got off his ass and made it happen, which has been really cool to see, inspiring for me to see. Yes, I said it, Cory. And so that's been fun. And it came at a time where, I had recently gone through, still will always be going through, a pretty heavy, terrible, traumatic loss of my mom. So she passed away 4 or 5 days after getting T-boned at an intersection in Florida in 2021. And, when stuff like that happens, you guys know this, when you suffer traumatic loss or go through some heavy adversity in your life, there's not a playbook that somebody hands you. And like when you're going through school, there's not a course on how to deal with grief or what to expect. And you're just kind of out there in the wilderness and you don't know if what you're experiencing is right or normal. And it can be super disorienting, right? These intrusive thoughts that pop into your head. And so um, I think just hearing one of the things that was most helpful for me, and Cory says this too, for some of the things he's dealt with, is hearing somebody put into words what you've been feeling and didn't know how to describe, and then to say that that's normal and even expected is
Mm,
it's incredibly helpful to somebody in that moment. And so that was one of the things that we hope people can take away from this is that just know that what you're going through is um not out of the normal. And
mm,
one of the things he was saying that he was going to steal my line for is everybody's got to eat and everybody's got to go through shit, and that's true. And that's what the show is about. And I think the format of the show, if you watch any episodes, is true to life, because there's no, on the show we'll be laughing one minute, ragging on each other, literally crying the next minute. Somebody will be talking about something super heavy that they've gone through, uh, and then we'll be back to laughing and throwing food at each other, and
mhm.
that's kind of how life is. Like, there's no warning signs for like, okay, it's fun right now, but in 5 minutes, something traumatic's going to happen and it's going to turn your world upside down. Or, you're sitting at the hospital bed next to your mom who's dying, and a thought pops in your head that makes you laugh, or you're like
Yeah.
telling a joke to your sister in the moment because of what popped into your head, and those things, the juxtaposition can be disorienting. And that's just the way life is. Like, all of these things happen at once, and that's what we wanted to portray in the show. The other thing too is that we wanted to show that it's okay for dudes to talk about hard things with their friends, and that
Mhm.
it's not that's not something they should feel ashamed of, or like it's not manly to do. I mean, me and Cory are obviously pretty manly, so if we
Yeah,
can talk
clearly.
about this, that goes without saying. I should have even said it, but if we can talk about things like this, then hopefully it makes somebody else understand that. And the format is less intimidating, right? We're not sitting down in a counselor's chair staring at each other talking about hard things, because that's what we're here to do. You're just standing around in the kitchen at your buddy's house slinging shit on the stove, and whatever comes up comes up. So
I
it's been a really, really fun journey.
is that what kind of helped both of you guys, was just friends and community and being able, to talk about the challenges, like Sam, you specifically for your mom, and then Cory for the things that you've been through, which haven't talked about yet, but I'm sure that there's a multitude of events that you're pulling from your service, and just being a human being, right? Because Sam, to your point, my dad anniversary of passing is tomorrow, 1 year.
Oh, man,
So, but
always hard.
it's always hard, and did not die in a traffic accident. He died from cancer at 76 in his bed, and that was one of the most traumatic things I ever experienced. And it's like I don't think there's any loss that's not traumatic in some sense of the
Sure,
word, and there's variations, to it, but that's just, like, the experience of being a human being on planet Earth. So, what was it for you guys that kinda helped you get through that, and where were you drawing inspiration from to kinda say, "Hey, let's, like, take this and we can, add to the equation, we can add value here." Are there inspirations you were looking to, or, how did you get it where it's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, this is, something that we're gonna take out and put out into the world?"
I think you said it. Like, for me, it was like, how do we remind ourselves that we are human? Like, we're not a set of statistics. We're not, numbers uh, on a roll call sheet. We're not
Anymore.
just, expenses on a profit and loss statement, right? Like, we're all humans, and we all have our own lives. We all have our friends and our family. We're all trying to like live our own experiences that we enjoy. And life is going to life at you, right? Like, it's going to throw these losses in your life, and it's going to throw these traumatic experiences. And and somebody once said to me that, like post-traumatic stress is a natural reaction to abnormal circumstances, right?
Mm.
And so thinking through, like, a lot of people, they start to feel these feelings and they don't know what to do with them. They stop living. There's the Sheepdog movie. I don't know if you guys have been able to see that yet, but it's incredible. And there's a line in it where the counselor says, the therapist says, "You were willing to die for your country. Why don't you try living for it?" Right. And
Mm.
for me, it was like so many times when I've been there in the darkness where you can't see tomorrow and you can't think about like what great things might be happening to you later on as your life keeps going. And so how do we help people get through that circumstance and know that there's plenty of times that you're still going to be able to laugh. There's plenty of times that you're still going to be able to see things you've never seen before and experience things with people that you want to be around. And for me, having seen so many people just get bogged down with what they've got going on, when I know that if you just can open your mind a little bit and hear a little bit of the mantras and maybe even go to therapy, like whatever might can help you, there's so much life left to live. There's so many things that you can still enjoy. You can hold space
Yeah.
for the grief. You can hold space for the bad things that are going to happen in life. But please don't shut down because of it. Like there's people
And
that
it's not
want
a
you to,
either or.
yeah, it's not.
You can mix those emotions in, and like you were talking about, Sam, like one of the first memories I had after I got blown up September 17th, 2004 in Fallujah, Iraq. One of my first funny memories, and my sister swears that she thinks she traumatized me and I'm just being nice about it. But she had this big beach purse on her back. I'm an above knee amputee. She leans over to hug me and that thing sledgehammers around and just hits me right in the stump. And I said, "Whoa there, Kathy Bates." And it's literally one of my favorite jokes to come up with that in the hospital, high on God knows whatever they had in my system. It was just one of those things that just happened, and no joke, just feeling I felt connected to my family again, just with the dark humor. And I'm the resident crier here. And I remember the first time I did a talk where I actually cried during it, and it opened up something inside me to realize that vulnerability is a strength. It's you bottle things in that glass bottle of your ability to hold stuff in, and it's going to shatter one day. That lid's going to pop off. And so I'm one thing I think the military does a really good job of teaching us, though, is we don't get trapped as much in that cycle of pre-perfection. We do, and we fix it as we go. I'm really curious what these first couple of gatherings looked like for you guys. Was it messy? Was it awkward? Did it feel smooth? Was it, what were those first couple of filmings like for you guys?
We talked about that. And I think we ended up having to give each other permission. Like there's nothing like ugly crying on camera for thousands of people to see, you
Yeah.
know?
As very
And
manly men.
I,
Yes, of
I,
course.
I cry. I cry I like Lonesome Dove. You know the movie?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
when Call is taking Gus home back to Texas to bury him, man, I'm going to be just losing it that whole set of scenes, Spider-Man,
How's that for
getting
an little
stopped on the
Alabama
train. Yeah,
boy?
say that's right.
Yeah.
Like Joe, I cry all the time too now, and I think it's cathartic for me, right? Like I feel like I just sometimes I'll put on Lonesome Dove just because I know like I got to get some of this out,
I have a
you know.
crying song. It's "Goodbye, Dear Friend" by a band called Deer Tick. I'm telling you, you want a good cry? It's
That's
oh my
awesome.
god, that's my crying song.
Check out
That's
some Deer
awesome.
Ticks.
I
Yeah,
mean, crying's manly, dude.
Yeah,
Winston Churchill said that he blubbed a lot and he saved the freaking world. So like, it doesn't get much manlier than that. I would say that yes, we cry, and we don't know we're going to, but on the show, but it's raw and unscripted. Like the only thing that's scripted is that there is a dish we're going to cook and it requires steps. And so we have to do whatever we're going to do in between starting the cook and finishing the cook. Everything else is, we'll have a theme for the episode, like service or grief or barriers to therapy or something like that. But there's no like scripted lines or talking points. We're just going to talk about our experience with those things. And we also kind of emphasize the mistakes because that's, again, the whole shtick of the show is that it's really who we are and how we are. And
Sincere.
yeah, we're not going to hide from that and try to make it look polished and perfect. I mean, the production quality is the most professional thing on there. Cory and I are not. So, and we have nothing to do with that. But one thing that I would like to jump back to is the reason Cory started this show too, that he hasn't talked about yet, is he's been doing work for mental health advocacy and hands on boots on the ground work for years and years through different organizations. And he just felt like it wasn't enough. He wanted to do more. And you want to tell him about Zach, Cory?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of us have a guy or a gal, right, that like our unit went overseas. We were lucky not to lose anybody overseas. We had people get hurt, plenty of IEDs and things like that. So that was something we kind of took pride in. But since that's 2008, we came back. And since 2008, we've lost like 15, 16, 17 people to suicide, and the first several of them, we're talking about a cavalry troop, right? So, everybody in it. So I knew the people. And then one day there was that phone call about my closest battle buddy, he became one. And that's when, like, it's one thing when there's a guy in another platoon and you know him. It's another thing when it's a guy that was in your squad, your section, that you hung out with every day for months in a combat zone. It's different. It hits different. And you go through that whole, exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody who's going to listen to this podcast knows the guilt. Yeah. And there was speaking of Dothan, we drove, 16 hours from DC to Dothan for the funeral. That's a long time to think, a long time to second guess, a long time to go through everything that you're going to go through. And then all the way back. I spent all that time on the way back thinking, like, what am I going to do now? I have to do something. I can no longer just sit here and wait for phone calls about guys, Am I going to fix it? No. But what can I do? And that started my journey into, starting at organizations, working tables, handing out brochures, knowing that I could do more, feeling that I had to do something more, and then trying to figure that out. But between that and like, you get on a project like this and you start to hear so many stories. Our producer, Tracy, her dad was a Vietnam vet, died by suicide. She comes to the show with that. Sam lost his mom unexpectedly, comes to the show with that. Every guest we have on, from Ryan Mannion, who we all know what she's suffered through, to, everybody has a story. And you start to hear them, they pile up. And they need to be told, though. They need to be told because somebody else out there who's not going to share their story like this, they can relate to it. And they can grapple with the grief. And they can also hear somebody like Ryan's inspiring story about how she took that grief and how her family took that grief and has now created this big movement that Travis would have been very proud of. Like, that helps people, right? That helps people in their own lives who will never, ever share their story with the world. But they need to know, like, how do I get past this moment? Because I'm going through the same thing. I can relate to that. It helps them do that. And that's I think, the thing that I'm happiest about with this project is that we can play a part in that.
How do you guys determine what the dishes are going to be? Do you guys have your own kind of repertoire that you pull
Yeah.
from, or do you like co-collaborate with like the guests, or how? And then I'm thinking too, like, okay, so you're going to cook with this person, but you don't want like a 4-hour dish. That's going to be a long show, right? So
Yeah.
it's got to be something you
Bologna
can make in like
sandwiches.
30 minutes to an hour. How does all that work?
So we've learned, like now we're getting into the cooking show aspect of it, right? There's tricks of the trade.
Yeah.
We've cooked things the day before, the night before, right? And we staged them, like some things we cook twice for exactly the reason you're talking about, Adam. Like they may take long, but they're awesome. You got to learn how to cook a beef bourguignon, like that.
Cory has a fetish for big, long French dishes.
I do like a good French dish,
Wow. Okay.
I like complex things
Yeah.
that I can show somebody that it's not that difficult if you just have good ingredients and you follow the recipe. But Sam's dad owned a barbecue truck when he was younger.
Really?
Yeah,
Cool.
barbecue joint. We've cooked some of the stuff out of his cookbook. We do try to let the guest, like, I want something like what's meant something to you, growing up. Like what can we cook that has an attachment to some memory that's good for you or like that you really, really enjoy. And other than that, it's just, if we don't have a guest on, we're going to either pull from Sam's dad's cookbook or we're going to pull from like Julia Child. I figure one or the other.
Well, if you ever
Ratatouille.
need a guest, let me know because I love to eat. I love to eat. Love
Careful
to eat.
what you wish for, man.
Well, you
Dude,
guys have
I'll go to DC. I've done it a dozen times in the past 12 months, so I'll do it
you
again.
guys have a spot for sure.
No
Love
doubt.
it.
I'll be thinking about the dish now.
Yeah. So on my end of things, I'm curious, what was it like the first time? Sometimes you get a guest, and we were joking around right when we started. I knew this was going to be a great interview. I like people that are willing to be sincere and vulnerable. And but I'm curious what it was like the first time you got a guest and you were like, oh hell yeah. Like this person is in it to win it with us. Like they're here for all the right reasons. They're willing to talk. They're open. They don't have an agenda. What's the first episode that you remember went way deeper than you expected?
One, Cory, deep. What are you gonna say? You never forget your first of all. But
Yeah. We had a good friend of mine that was our first guest, and that was great. I've liked all our guests for different reasons. Like, I'm really glad Ryan came on because I find her so inspiring. And but Sam has a friend that he works with, Keena,
Mhm.
and she talked about something that me and Sam could never have talked about by ourselves, and that's domestic violence and losing one of her dear friends to domestic violence. And like I spent about that whole episode just not trying not to just blubber all over everything, but just listening to her talk about something like that like as men we don't really experience that as much as women do and to the same level. I think like that really hit me pretty hard. But I think every guest that comes on has something um that that's why we choose and ask people. We feel like their story, their what they can relate to is going to offer value to the people out there that might need to hear it.
Yeah, well, and be just a really compelling, however unfortunately it is that the story that exists, but be a compelling story that can move somebody, and help them to see themselves in the story. And Keena's was the one that I was thinking of, Cory, because I mean, first of all, Keena is a damn ball of energy. Like she's at work today. We're at my office building, but she just is lights up a room when she walks into it. She's super fun, smart as hell, and if you're having a bad day, you want Keena to show up. And I didn't know any of this before she came on the show, right? And she is not only came on to share her story and her friend's story, but to announce a nonprofit that she's standing up in honor of her friend. I'll save the name of it because it's Keena's news to tell, but that will provide a shelter for anybody who is suffering from domestic violence, man, woman, child, provide you security, provide you a place to stay, provide you food, handle whatever you have going on in your life so that you don't have to worry about that while you get back on your feet. And like, how incredible is that? And that's what I mean earlier when we were talking about like how humbling it is to meet these people and talk with them. I've been with Keena all day for almost 10 years, did not know any of this, right?
Wow.
And like
Yeah.
that again is just she's been sitting with that for years. And eat your feelings for us, but also hopefully for the people who watch it, serve as a venue for things to come out and things to open up and stories to be told and vulnerabilities to be shared, and connections to be made. And I'm telling you what, man, when that episode, whenever we do pony up the money, scrounge up the money to get that one put together, there's not going to be a dry eye on the internet, because that one is really powerful, but at the same time, funny as shit.
Well,
Yeah.
there's something powerful about, creating the space, and the container. And I love what you guys said earlier too, like everybody eats, everybody goes through stuff. And
Yeah.
it's something about like the process of, bringing all the ingredients together, the thought process, the planning, the pre-cooking in some cases, or, for the guests, you're like, okay, I'm going to go here. What I'm going to talk about, how am I going to show up? They're coming, prepared too with their own
Mhm.
checklist. And then you're mixing all that together, while and getting your hands dirty too. There's something about being in community, in connection, and the physical process. And then at the very end, there's like there's a real product that's like real tangible, like you can
Mhm.
really eat it, tastes really good.
Mhm.
And it's about like being humans, all the way. So I'm thinking about like the Legion, I'm thinking about our posts. A lot of them have like kitchens, in them and stuff. What would you say to them? What would be like a minimum viable product, like of them just not just because maybe I've heard like fundraisers, where they do pancake breakfasts and stuff like that. And so in some ways, like maybe that's already happening. And maybe there's just an opportunity to take it to the next level. Or if there's a post out there that's got a kitchen or something, they haven't even thought about it. Maybe just be able to bring people together with the intent of like, bring your mother's or your grandmother's, cookbook, and let's pull a recipe out, and we're all gonna bunch of dudes and girls gonna make it together. What could happen there? What kind of healing could happen?
Yeah, I've talked to Dave Wallace at the Vienna Post. They
Mm.
do a breakfast once a month, and I mean, obviously, we see and we use food as a connector, and we think about the table and the power of the table, right? Whether that's a physical table or metaphorical table, like
Mm,
we want more people at the table, not less. We try to apply that thinking to, all right, how do especially, you're right, these posts where anywhere in the country, if they had that kitchen, they're already a leg up. Can they utilize that as a connection point? If it's like wings night, or if it's like, hey, come do a cooking class, right? Like something that's experiential. I just learned that word, by the way.
Nailed it.
But like it's something that can draw a crowd, a community. And then once you have them there, what can you utilize that table for, right? What can you, because you should do more. Like if I go back
Right.
to my youth and think about my Nana, which is what it really inspired me to cook in the first place, we could be having crappy days. The outside world, like I said, right? Life's going to life at you. But you go to that house and she cooks that food with magic and love that only Nanas have. You can put away all that stuff for a little while. And you can just think about like the stories that you'll tell. They'll all be mainly good ones because you're going to laugh. You're enjoying the food. You're going to laugh.
mhm.
You're going to have time to just like, it's going to be okay for a little while.
Yeah.
And
Well, no, that's right.
the Legion can do that. Like they have that ability. And I think that's the thing that's generationally can help draw in some of those younger veterans, and thinking about like, how do we use this kitchen, and then how do we use the food that we can make to create experiences that can be engaging and can be positive, right? Because if the food's good, and maybe even if it isn't, but like if there's like a good vibe that can be created, a lot of great things can happen with the people that are experiencing it.
I know that's right. I never met a pizza I didn't like.
That's right. That's right.
For me, I have noticed that in my life, I have had people open up to me that I can never understand exactly how it happened. I had a waitress one time explain to me a childhood trauma and then say that she'd never told anyone before. Me and a friend of mine had been talking to her for um 20 minutes maybe. And it was the weirdest thing, but obviously they were ready to talk, and it might not have been my charming personality or whatever that pulled it out. It might have just been I was there when it happened. But there's something about some people that makes people feel safe. I want to give props to Stacy, our co-host who's not here today, as one of the people that can have somebody have an emotional conversation about something that's very tough for them on camera, knowing it's going to go out into the world and say things that they might not have ever said to anyone, because there's just something about a sincere person who's asking a question out of love that can get an answer that you wouldn't just give anybody. And when we go into something with sincerity and with that vulnerability, you get that back a lot of times. Sometimes you have to sort of lead by example. And it's as men, I think culture as men has gotten really better. It's gotten really special. I can compliment a guy for what he's wearing or how his, I see a guy in the gym. I'm like, dude, you're killing it in here. And there's no weirdness whatsoever until I smell his hair.
Well, it's a
And
little weird. Joe's like, "Hey, cute top."
well, you
It's a
say it
little,
from
it's a little
behind them
weird.
real close. That normally gets negative results.
If you say cute top while you're smelling his hair, that really
Guys like
really
their shit
gets them
being
going.
called tops. So yeah, that's generally.
But he was wearing a tank top in his
He was
defense.
wearing
So.
a tank top. Nice top, bro. Nice top, bro. But I just want to give you guys props on obviously being the kind of people that can, they can pull that out of people. And I want to let you know how much we absolutely appreciate your time, because I know what you guys could be making lasagna right now, but instead you're wasting time with us knuckleheads. And so, but you get an opportunity to take that bad stuff and make something good out of it. And I think that that's really important. So do you guys have a plan for the immediate future? I'd love to hear a little bit before we close out about what you guys have got going on in the near future.
Yeah, so we have 9 episodes that we have filmed, and we are working through the post-production now, and we are going to start releasing them next week. I think by the time this episode drops, there will be the chance to see a good handful of those
Nice.
episodes as new episodes, with some really great guests that have come to the table, no pun intended. And I think in July or August, we're looking to create some new experiences with some new guests. We've got some really great influencers. We're hoping, Shu's been working with us to try to get an American Legion episode out with Austin. Hopefully, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Talking with Sergeant Knucklehead. Talking with a non-military veteran guy that has brought us in under his wing and showed us some stuff. Sam Nathews. We're hoping we can get an episode with him. He's very inspiring, and he does it so effortlessly. And hopefully, the writer, director, creator of Sheepdog the movie, which if you haven't seen, I hope people will take the opportunity to go see. Stephen Graham is very excited to come on and make some omelets, which is I cannot do, no matter what I try.
I love a good omelet though,
So
man.
we're trying to.
We've had Steven and Austin on
Yeah,
too. So
yeah.
yeah.
So like we're hoping that we can keep kind of leveling up our game and get some really great guests with some wonderful stories out there that deserve to be told. And we have some people that maybe not household names, but their stories are so incredible, and they deserve a place to tell them and a place that they can share them. And that's what we're hoping to offer.
And where can folks listen to the first episodes, and then where will you guys be releasing the new ones?
So Eat Your Feelings lives on YouTube. You can find us at Eat Your Feelings Show. That's our handle just about on every platform. But the episodes themselves we drop out on YouTube. Um, the channel now, I think we have 5 episodes that we've put out there that of the Eat Your Feelings Show, and then we have another segment of shows we call Just Go Cook Something. That's me and Sam in our own kitchens with one camera, just open up the pantry and trying to figure something out that night, right? Because like you said, Adam, like you get kids, you get life, you get everything. Sometimes you just need something quick, fast, in a hurry, but it's got to be good. Cooking is my love language, so like I'll find some simple stuff, but it's going to end up being really good. So we have a show for that too, and all that content you can find on our YouTube channel. If you like your short form stuff, we'll keep some clips going for you. We try to, humor, some cooking related stuff, and then some heavier stuff as well, just to kind of hit all those notes. But yeah, Eat Your Feelings Show. That's where we are.
All right,
We also
Alphas.
have an OnlyFans too that Cory
Oh my God.
specifically uses. He cooks things with his feet on there. Sometimes he has
Yeah.
his cavalry Stetson on while he does it.
That's how you guys are really funding the operation. Okay.
Yeah, for
Well,
sure. Yeah, you got to do it somehow.
there you go, Alphas. You can
Yeah.
go to Eat Your Feelings Show on YouTube or eatyourfeelingshow.com to learn more about Cory and Sam and what they got cooking, pun intended.
with their
Cory
feet.
and Sam, thank you so much for visiting us today. We had a great time with you guys. You made Joe and I hungry, but more than anything, thanks for opening up your hearts a bit today, and really appreciate you guys and all the great work that you're doing. Okay,
Thank you
Alphas, stick
guys.
around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
In precision marksmanship, you compete against one of your most formidable opponents, yourself.
It's different than other sports, but it's also a lot of discipline. I definitely love the intensity and the challenge. I think that has also helped me come out of my shell because we go to so many different places, meet so many new people.
You gotta make sure that you're always there in the game at all times. It's nice to have like that sort of head-to-head competition.
So just get involved. We'll teach you how.
All right, Alphas, we hope you had a fantastic break. Right now, it's time for some scuttlebutt. What you got, Adam?
Well, yeah, this is a big one. Did you catch the president talking about psychedelic therapies in the Oval Office, Joe?
I feel like they've been doing psychedelics in the Oval Office for a while, but it's good that they're talking about it now.
Yeah. Back on April 18th, Donald Trump signed an executive order to accelerate research into mental health therapies for veterans, including ibogaine, MDMA, and psilocybin.
Which is wild because on this show alone, we've talked to a lot of people who've benefited from this stuff. So it's about time somebody's talking about it who's, have the kind of reach that they do.
Well, yeah, exactly. And that's really why this momentum matters right now. Also the American Legion has been out front on this, consistently supporting evidence-based research into PTSD, TBI, chronic pain, really the invisible wounds that are still impacting so many veterans that we talk about, so much, on this show. And Commander Dan Wiley, who was actually even just in the Oval Office with Trump back in December, came out and reinforced this most recent occurrence. He said, there's real promises here, a pathway to a brighter future for the veterans and their families. But he also made it clear that this has to be grounded in science, proven safe, and ultimately accessible through the VA when appropriate.
So, this obviously didn't come out of nowhere, but those terms are kind of like buzzwords. It makes me afraid of who's going to have their hands in this, but it's something that needs to happen one way or another. But it again, like you said, it's not out of just nowhere.
No, it's definitely been building, and the momentum is really starting to turn into real action. As you saw there.
So I know that you talk about this stuff and you advocate for this stuff all the time, Adam. I know you've got a personal story, with a family member that that started your journey. So what does this executive order actually mean to a knucklehead like me? Like, how do you
Yeah,
break it
for
down
sure.
to a simple Navy guy?
Yeah, and so I'll just say this, this is indeed, what I've been working on in one way or another, since separating in 2015. It's kind of the daily work, so to speak, for me. So this executive order being signed, it was a big day. It was a validating day. There's a lot of energy around it right now since the signing. A lot of emotion too. You know, you said my brother, you know, benefited from these therapies. I benefited, you know, personally, and so many folks are having their lives saved and transformed. But as that emotion builds and the excitement builds, we have to also have to stay grounded. And one of the big things we're doing right now is just helping to understand, you know, what the executive order was, what it isn't, and what still has to be done. Because at its core, this executive order is about accelerating research right now. It's about bringing together the top institutions and the heads of those institutions, like you saw in the Oval Office, prioritizing it, pushing funding in that direction. You even heard the president say, look at the veterans who've benefited, as he turns to Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, Congressman Morgan Luttrell, Rob O'Neill was there, Marcus Capone from Vets, saying that we know this is working as evidenced by these veterans here. But the reality is that bringing this into the medical system is much more complex. These are intensive therapies. We need preparation. There's a different level of supervision that has to happen. Integration has to happen on the other side. So it's very different from traditional care.
So we've got a little bit of a road in front of us before we have access. We've got, research, a lot of research. This isn't legislation necessarily promoting access. This is the beginnings, really.
Right. You nailed that. So not legislation yet, not access yet. It's an executive order, and the executive order is directing institutions to come together. And there's some funding coming from ARPA H through the Evident program, and that's going to go to more research. And right now, access is still happening through veteran-led organizations and nonprofits who are stepping up to fill that gap, just like they have been. I'm actually even starting to hear some larger VSOs that are now meeting with some of these clinics and some of these smaller organizations, figuring out how they can help their members start to get access today. So some really bold and innovative things happening in the ecosystem.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of the reason I think veterans can even access this stuff is because other veterans have gone first. In the same way that a lot of how we're treated is the pain that a lot of our Vietnam and World War II veterans even went through coming home. So, it's organizations that have to step up and lead from the front. And that's, that's kind of what we're fighting for here, is what the Legion is built on.
Yep. That's exactly it, man. So momentum is happening at the top, innovation at the edges and from the bottom up, and a system in the middle that hasn't caught up yet. But man, it's exciting to see those gaps start to close. So we're not just talking about the policy anymore. We're not just talking about the changes. We are starting to see it, and that's very encouraging. We're talking about one of the most significant shifts in veteran mental health care in decades. And the Legion's a part of it. We're a part of it. You're a part of it. And, it takes all of us, and it takes all of us to make sure we do it the right way.
I really like the momentum at the top, innovation at the edges, and a system in the middle that hasn't quite caught up with it yet. That's good words. That's a good Adam quote. But
Those are the
in kind
best
of
words. I like this guy. He's got great words.
so I
Trump,
got something
even
that's
Trump
kind
was
of
like, Ibogaine. He's like, wow, it helps with all that stuff. Can I get some of that? No, just kidding. I'm not depressed. I just work all the time. That's what he said in the Oval Office. So, all right.
there
Well,
when
that's
if
it.
you
So
haven't seen
much
it.
more to come. Much more to come on that. We got a link to the National Commander's comments in talking about the work that the Legion's been doing, some of the resolutions we've passed in the show notes, and we also have a link to the White House's executive order if you want to jump in and read up a little bit more. All right, Joe, but you got another side of the mental health equation, but a little bit different take on it. So what do you got for us today?
It's funny that these things are so closely related, but the research is going in a completely different direction. This is the kind of thing that has been floating around for a while, apparently, that I kind of knew was happening, but I just recently got sent this. So there's story that's been picking up steam again. Apparently it's circling back around in the medical and SOCOM communities. And we have spent years talking about TBI and PTSD. I remember when in 2004, when they didn't even have, like, that term wasn't even known to me personally as a normal guy. But there's some research coming out of the military's medical school that has again been circling around and made its way back to me. The Uniform Services University has apparently completely flipped the script on what an invisible wound actually looks like. It's one of those things that we know has existed and just didn't really know how to nail down what that looks like and the effects that it has. But a neuropathologist named Dr. Daniel Pearl has been studying the brains of veterans that died by suicide. And the name you're going to hear a lot related to this is Ryan Larkin. Ryan was a Navy SEAL, high performer, multiple tours in Iraq, Afghanistan. But before he passed, Navy doctors scanned his brain and told him that physically he was fine. And sadly, we all know people that have been in similar situations where they're like, we can't find what's going on with you. But the fact remains that his struggles were likely psychological to them. But we know that there's more than that. These invisible wounds have an effect. And sadly, it kind of comes down to the family to put pressure on people after they pass. And so unfortunately, Ryan's father, Frank Larkin, who was also a SEAL and later Senate Sergeant at Arms, donated Ryan's brain to Dr. Pearl. And they found a pattern of microscopic scarring that no standard MRI or CAT scan would ever see, ever. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is it's a great counter story to the first one, because this is the part of the work that we really started our first foundation and nonprofit around, and it was the TBI treatments outside of the system that really helped my brother before the psychedelic therapies help. Some of these are actually working in concert, but really it's because the system, specifically about this case, has been built to look at that one big event, like you were saying. And so if you don't have that event, like an IED blast or a specific concussion where you went unconscious, then it's hard to point to it. So what you're describing, this cumulative exposure that tracks what so many guys have been feeling but couldn't prove because the scans aren't able to show what's physiologically being damaged in the brain. So the question's always been, if the scans don't show it, then how do you diagnose it? And more importantly, how do you treat it?
This is so interesting. And I wanted to bring this up, not because I knew what was going on with it, but because if there's anybody that I wanted to talk about this with, it's you. I'm sure there's smarter people out there somewhere, but I don't have access to those people. So I've got to settle for the incredible Adam Marr. And I'm happy to do so. But, the scuttlebutt of this is, that's starting to change is that they're starting to change how the military trains. It's not just about, that one big blast that everyone thinks it is. When you think of traumatic brain injury, you think of a single incident, but there's a lot more to that. There's something called cumulative low-level blasts that you hinted to there, but we're talking about repetitive pressure waves from firing heavy weapons. I remember the first time I got to shoot the Sasser unofficially because I was the corpsman there, but I got to shoot the 50 cal, and I'll be honest with you, man, I felt that in my chest when I shot that thing. It was so cool. To shoot at something that's 2,000 meters away is just wild to me. But there are guys and gals out
just to
there
go
that
through
are,
basic training, even just
yeah,
basic training, every single person is going to fire something and have some kind of exposure.
yeah. And not to mention we're bouncing rocks off of each other's heads when you're wearing helmets and stuff because, you're bored. Why not? But, every time these weapons go off, a pressure wave passes completely through the skull. It's not enough to knock you out, but over a career, it's like thousands of tiny hammers hitting the brain tissue. And when you're in a vehicle and an explosion goes off, it's not just one incident. You're actually, as the sound is bouncing back and forth inside of that vehicle, you're getting repeated. That's why TBIs tend to happen inside vehicle explosions more so than well, I don't want to say that because I don't have research, but from my understanding of it, a getting blown up in a vehicle can cause the reverberation to cause continued impacts. And so, that kind of stuff is just, it builds up, so they're trying to figure out a way to pinpoint this stuff and to mitigate it. But, it targets the areas that modulate your emotions and your logic. Like, this stuff has a long-term effect. And we've seen that in the behavior of people who've struggled. And it's hard, though, when you're just telling someone they need to talk to someone when there's so much more going on than just their emotions. It's so compelling that SOCOM actually commissioned a study at Mass General. They put 30 active duty volunteers into superpowered scanners and found actual, like, structural changes in their brains, like actual physical damage from just doing their jobs, day-to-day stuff. It's wild.
Yeah, and I want to, give a shout out to people like, Dr. Mark Gordon, and there's a clip where we started doing this work, kind of early on in 2016. We were in Fox News studio in New York City, and we did like a 5-minute live segment on July 4th, and that's in large part because of the clinical application of how he's identifying and treating some of this stuff. He's been a 6-time guest on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he's been identifying and treating, TBI for years. So, got to give recognition to him. But he's, looking at the biological and physiological side, and don't want to derail, too much about the science of it. I think I want to recommend Dr. Gordon to come on, and we should have an in-depth conversation, and you should just hear it, from the man himself, like
That would be
what he's
cool.
been doing, how he built the veterans programs, and 10 years ago was an early catalyst for this kind of whole TBI, PTSD movement. And the challenge is he's just one doctor with one clinic in California that, just like the rest of us, like, how do you get your new innovations adopted by the VA and by science? How can you do that when things are largely happening outside the system? What this research is starting to do is bring institutional validation to something that few leaders have been seeing on the ground for a long time. Once the system sees it, now you're talking about real implications for how we diagnose, treat, and ultimately take care of veterans at scale, veterans that, didn't have the chance, like Ryan Larkin.
But and like you said, this changes everything, because, like, this is the foundation. We know that there's a problem. We can actually point to what's happening now, and this gives us an opportunity to start working towards treating this stuff and that research that you were talking about earlier. So, honestly, this is what moves the conversation from it's all in your head to this is a service-connected physical injury. I can't begin to imagine the amount of people that have been affected by that negative mindset. But they are launching a 5-year study with 200 subjects to figure out how to shield troops from these microblasts, and more importantly, how to catch the scarring while the veteran is still with us. Frank Larkin has been tireless in this, saying he's on a path to make sure there are no more Ryans. And Legionnaires, this is a massive shift. This means the invisible is finally becoming visible. We're validated in the things that we, as people who've experienced this stuff, have been saying for years. And people keep saying, show me the science. Well, we have it now. If you've spent your career behind a 240 on a mortar plate, blowing doors, and you felt like standard TBI checks were missing something, you might be right. The science is catching up. And Adam, it rocks that you sat in on this one. Legionnaires, we want to hear from you, especially to our heavy weapons guys and gals, breachers. Does this microblast theory track with what you've experienced? Let us know on the socials. We're going to keep a close eye on this study as it moves forward. So,
Yeah, great job, Joe. Great conversation, great piece, and really a great show today. As always, thank you, Joe, for being here and for showing up and for opening up your heart and your mouth. So funny, and always doing such a great job, man. It's great to do this show with you. Definitely missing Stacy today, but she'll be back soon. All right, Alphas. Thanks again for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, or send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next time.